Hey everybody, good evening. Thanks for joining us. I know it's been pretty busy in the tropics. We've been talking about it heading into the weekend here. And so as we go into the next couple of days, we're going to have to watch very closely at what is going on in the tropics. So here to chat a little bit about that and give you some clarity on what is going on because it's been very active. We're now on our 12th named storm. We've got Laura, we've got TD14. Yesterday we were dealing with TD13 that turned into Laura. So we're going to make a lot of sense out of this right now. So I want to take you to the MyRadar app and show you what this looks like for those of you who love to track along with us in the app. We got the wind layer turned on here and also the radar to give you an idea of the tropics, the Atlantic basin as a whole here, ranging from the West Atlantic through the Caribbean and up through the Gulf of Mexico. You can see both storms here, and we're going to take this full screen so you can get a really good view of what we're about to talk about here. We're going to start off with Laura, which is the storm. It's labeled there. You see it on the right side of your screen. And so that is our tropical storm. That used to be TD13. 11 p.m. Thursday night or Wednesday night. My days are getting confused here. Very recently becoming Tropical Storm Laura and becoming somewhat better organized as the hurricane hunters have found. So it is sitting right over the Lesser Antilles Islands and will be moving inland towards the Greater Antilles. So over the Virgin Islands, British and U.S., through Puerto Rico, through the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and we'll get through the track here in a moment, but we'll be moving inland towards the Caribbean here. And so that's the one storm we're looking at. Then we also have our attention on Tropical Depression 14, so a somewhat weaker storm. That's what you see there off the coast of Central America and just south of the Yucatan Peninsula there of Mexico. And you can see generating lots of shower activity that's showing up on our radar. And the winds layer is showing you we've got some pretty strong winds here just to the north of Laura and in general north of 14 and to the east of it. So these storms trying to get their act together. Of course, this shows us a snippet of what's going on and really focusing on the Caribbean here. This is where our race, so to speak, begins. This is a distance race we're counting on. And as we head into the Gulf of Mexico, that's where things begin to get a bit hairy. And that's what we're going to be looking for this weekend, especially as we look for the impacts that we could see to the Gulf Coast of the United States. So a lot to cover here. We're going to begin now looking at our graphics and show you the paths. This has been a topic lots of people have been really excited about, if that's the word to use, because a somewhat rare occurrence is likely to unfold as we head into the next couple of days. So here's a look at the Caribbean, and as we advance the graphics, here are the two paths for these storms going into the weekend. You can see they overlap a bit. In the Gulf of Mexico, a relatively small basin of water. This is not something that happens all the time, at least not at the same time. So back in 2004, as Bonnie was making its way onshore the Gulf Coast, we had Charlie that wasn't yet in the Gulf of Mexico making its way in. We've had some near passes. In 1959, we did have two storms in the Gulf, but not nearly at the strength that we expect these to be, nor the organization. And then all the way back, September 5th of 1933, we actually had two hurricanes or tropical systems in the Gulf of Mexico at the same time, making landfall within 24 hours of each other. So this is a pretty unprecedented event for the Gulf of Mexico, and that's where a lot of people have been talking about. Plus, with the paths coming so close, there's been a meteorological term thrown around called the Fujiwara effect, which is something that happens more frequently in the Pacific Basin, where the storms kind of do a dance around one another and eventually fight it out to see who's the stronger storm. We won't have as dramatic of a tango here in the Gulf of Mexico, and we'll explain exactly what is at play here going on for the long term of the track in just a moment. But I want to start off by introducing where we stand with each storm. So we'll start off with Laura. I'm going to show you the watches and warnings that are in effect for this storm. Remember, a tropical storm, maximum sustained winds as of the 8 p.m. advisory standing at 45 miles per hour. So you can see the clouds wrapping around the islands here near St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we have tropical storm warnings spanning all the way across the northern island for parts of the Dominican Republic, north shore of Haiti. This is the island of Hispaniola. And then as we get into the southern Bahamas, that's where we see tropical storm watches in effect. So as Laura progresses westward across the Caribbean, a somewhat uncertain path like this, very close or just north of the islands here, and that poses a variety of scenarios here. Now, if the center stays over water, there's less likely to be some disruption in the circulation. If it passes more on land, the center of the storm that is, then we're likely to see some more weakening, especially because some of these islands have some pretty jagged mountains on them, and that helps disrupt the circulation. Tropical storms need warm waters to feed off of. They're like heat engines. So all my car enthusiasts, you'll know how these work very well. So if they have access, if the center of the storm has access to those very warm waters near these islands and can kind of fight its way around the topography of these islands, then it can withstand and make its way through. And so as we watch the situation unfold, the National Hurricane Center has issued the tropical storm warning for these islands and a tropical storm watch for the southern Bahamas so that we can get folks prepared, because very small changes in the path can mean different impacts, hopefully for the better for folks here, but best to stay safe and prepared ahead of the storm. That's one thing we're looking at here. Now, as we head on to the watches and warnings that are in effect for TD14, Tropical Depression 14, not quite a tropical storm yet, though it is expected to become one here very soon. I think we could see that by the 11 p.m. advisory. If not, I think certainly by the 5 a.m. or early tomorrow morning, we could see this get a name. The clouds here showing you somewhat of the position. This has been a somewhat disorganized storm, kind of hard to tell where the center is, but it's about here where this circular dense cloud structure is here in the waters off the coast of Belize and south of the Yucatan Peninsula. So as it continues on a path crossing the peninsula, it's going to cross very close to or right near the tip of the Yucatan. And with that, it's likely to be a tropical storm. So those warnings are in effect, and we could get hurricane-like conditions. Likely to see that where gusts reach hurricane force. Remember, that starts at 74 miles per hour. So again, keeping folks prepared here. We do have some topography to deal with on this landmass as well. So a little bit of mountainous terrain to disrupt the circulation. But looks like because the storm is moving so quickly, that isn't going to do much to help weaken the storm. So these are the variety of factors that folks at the National Hurricane Center are paying very close attention to as they do their round-the-clock forecasts with this. And hurricane hunters have been out flying in these storms all day today and yesterday collecting data. In fact, that's how we got to naming Laura at 9 a.m. This morning, not a normal time to see an advisory. They had enough data come back from the hurricane hunters to give that designation. So with that, that's where we got that. Not a very well organized tropical storm. 45 miles per hour is a bit on the weaker side, but still formidable, something to pay attention to and something to be prepared for, because any of these storms could be damaging for folks. We're expecting to see anywhere from 3 to maybe 5 inches of rain going over the islands as Laura passes by them in the Caribbean. So that's still substantial. Now, going back to the path once again, this is something that's very interesting. It's just meteorologically interesting from a nerd standpoint and from a layman standpoint. Something to keep in mind, the path here for Laura has trended further south over the past couple advisories. And part of that is the hurricane hunters finding that somewhat disorganized center a bit further south. This similar situation happened with TD14. So these tracks have shifted. They will continue to shift as the hunters spend more time in there, get more information, and as these storms become better developed, as they spend more time over these warm ocean waters and kind of get that tight center wrapped in. But as we head into the weekend, by Monday, early wee hours of the morning, 2 a.m. Monday, we expect the storm Laura to be by the island of Cuba. That means some feeder bands, some rain could be impacting the central Bahamas and into South Florida. How much of that impact will arrive by then is uncertain at this point. The best advice to give folks in those areas, whether in the Bahamas or in South Florida, is to have your kit ready. We tell you to do that every June 1st, and that's something we mentioned in our hurricane special series, is to have your supplies ready just in case, because all it takes is one storm. We are now on our 12th named storm, and very soon, likely to be on our 13th, TD14 becomes a tropical storm as forecast. The next name on the list is Marco. So likely to be dealing with those two in the Gulf of Mexico as early as Sunday evening or Monday morning. So with that, very interesting to see what kind of storms are left once they go over the land masses. And depending on that, these two will not do well in the Gulf of Mexico together. Being tropical storms, they're both low pressure systems. The atmosphere does a really good job of trying to find balance. So we can't have two strong tropical systems in the Gulf of Mexico. They just won't allow one to outshine the other. So that's the good news for folks here on the Gulf Coast. You won't deal with what might be floating around on social media as a super hurricane or some kind of freak storm in that sense. What is more than likely to happen is whichever storm gets into the Gulf first will influence the other, disrupt the upper atmosphere a bit so that the other can't truly thrive. And so that's why the National Hurricane Center, as you'll notice, has very limited intensity for these storms. Laura expected to be a Category 1 hurricane as it emerges into the Gulf of Mexico on Tuesday, and then making landfall on Wednesday as a Category 1 hurricane. TD14 expected to be Marco very soon, emerging from the Yucatan Peninsula as a tropical storm on Sunday. And then as it traverses those very, very warm Gulf of Mexico waters, spending some time as a hurricane, but dissipating to a tropical storm and eventually a low as it makes its way onshore, likely somewhere between the Louisiana-Texas border down to the Mexico-Texas border. So anywhere along the Texas coastline here, folks need to stay very attentive to the forecast going into the weekend here. And the same can be said for folks on the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico, anywhere from the Texas-Louisiana border back around to the Big Bend of Florida. Need to keep an eye out on this forecast because as these storms get closer, we get more data and they have that very critical land interaction. We are very likely to see these paths change just a bit. So I'd like you to, if you're going to focus on something, focus on the first 3 days of each of these paths, just the first 3 days, because that's where we have the most certainty, of course. And then as these storms emerge into the Gulf of Mexico, that's really where the deck of cards gets thick and things can change very quickly. So at this point, I would urge everyone to have your supplies ready, have a plan in place so that all you have to do is focus on this forecast and then you can make your decision on how to prepare for it. Something else I'd like to bring to your attention is the water vapor imagery. So we look at these satellite images. This is looking from the top third of the atmosphere. So around 300 millibars gives us a really good idea of the steering currents and kind of what's moving everything around weather-wise in the atmosphere. So these brighter shades that you'll see here are moisture. The darker shades, especially this orange and dark gray area, is dry air. And what we can do is identify the jet stream here. So it might be a little bit difficult to see the map here, but my arrow here is pointing to Texas. Then we go along the Gulf Coast here back towards Florida. So we right now have a dip in the jet stream that is surging moisture from the Gulf of Mexico up into the southeast. That's why we've had a slew of storms for the past couple of days for folks here across Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Florida, dealing with an abundance of tropical moisture. And you'll notice this counterclockwise spin here, low pressure. This has been somewhat cut off from the jet, so this guy is going to stick around, and although it won't continue to produce as much shower activity going into the weekend, it is going to have some impact on what happens to TD14 and what happens with Tropical Storm Laura. As these two emerge into the Gulf, this will play a role in the steering current somewhat. And so that's where we're seeing these tracks kind of dance along the northern part of the Gulf Coast is the influence in the steering current. So that's one thing to consider. We also have the Bermuda High that hangs out around here permanently or semi-permanently. It's a semi-permanent high pressure system. So that generally is this clockwise motion you see here. It hangs off the coast of the U.S. pretty much all year long and will move either towards the east or back towards the west. And this is a big weather maker that helps to steer these tropical systems across the Atlantic and either up the coast on the east side of the U.S. or along the Gulf Coast. So right now that is building back towards Florida, and that's helping to chart Laura along its path, moving it across the islands. And frankly, that's part of the reason why these storms are moving so quickly. These storms have been moving anywhere from 15 to 20 miles per hour. That's a very quick storm motion for these big tropical systems. They don't tend to move that quickly, so something impressive to note there. But That's just about what's going on in the tropics. Wanted to get you up to date. Our next advisory will be out here at 11 p.m. for the National Hurricane Center. Of course, you'll get your notification in the MyRadar app to let you know the latest on each storm. You can track along with us in the app, and we'll be bringing you those updates on our social media channels. Plus, check out the fast forecast tomorrow, where we'll be giving you a broader update on what's going on in the tropics and the weather where you live. So stick with us through it all, and we'll guide you through this tropical season on to storm 12, possibly 13 here as we head into the weekend. Hope it's a great one for you guys out there. Stay safe, and we'll see you back here later on.